What's going on, everybody? Welcome in the Vikings Now by Chat Sports. I am your host, Patrick Siepman, and coming up on today's show, we're going to be looking at Mel Kiper's latest NFL draft big board and kind of diving into some prospects at key positions of need for the Minnesota Vikings. We'll dive into it on today's show, go over a bunch of names, so stay with us through the entire thing. But first, I just want to address what are the top roster needs on the Minnesota Vikings. So, number one, I think it's interior of the offensive line. I was debating interior O-line or defensive tackle, but this has been an issue for the Minnesota Vikings for the last, 10 seasons, it feels like. So this is what I would want to address first in free agency or the draft. Then I go defensive tackle number 2. Then I got cornerback at number 3 with guys like Stephon Gilmore, Shaq Griffin, and Byron Murphy all set to hit free agency. And then I did include running back in this as well, as I think that's a sneaky need on this roster. But also want to look at draft capital for the Vikings. Right now, it's very limited. It is only a 4-pick draft for the Minnesota Vikings, so each of these picks are going to be huge. And in round 1, you got the 24th pick. Round 3, you got the 97th pick. Round 5, 139, and another round 5 draft pick at 161. But before we show you Mel Kiper's big board, first I want to say thank you guys so much. We're actually less than 30 subscribers away from 52,000 subs. So if you guys could help us out, reach that next milestone here at Vikings Now by Chat Sports, I would greatly appreciate it. So hit that subscribe button, lock us in. Do not miss a thing around the Minnesota Vikings, and subscribe today. All right, let's dive into Mel Kiper's big board. So I just took from prospect number 16 to 25, since the Vikings have the 24th pick in the draft. Didn't bother showing you guys 1 through 15, but he's got Josh Simmons, an offensive tackle, Mike Green, an edge rusher, Luther Burton, a wide receiver, Elijah Arroyo, tight end from Miami. He is a stud. And you also got Malaki Starks, which a lot of mock drafts have the Vikings taking him, but I would be against that. And then specifically pick number 23, Tyler Booker, offensive guard from Alabama. And then Jihad Campbell, linebacker from Bama, and then also Walter Nolen. Watch out for him possibly being a Minnesota Viking at pick number 24, D-tackle from Ole Miss. But, I think this draft is pretty interesting because I think the prospects you could get from pick number 20 to pick number 60 all will relatively have the same draft grade. So it gets me to this thought. I think there's a good chance that the Vikings trade back this season. Like maybe they send away pick number 24 for a team that's desperate to take a quarterback or a big-time edge rusher. If one of these guys are falling down, I could see the Vikings trading back and then maybe getting a pick at round 2, round 3, and then just move off pick number 24. But let's first start off with the interior offensive line. As I said, this is the biggest position of need for the Minnesota Vikings. We're going to start off with Tyler Booker here, actually former high school teammate of J.J. McCarthy back when they were at IMG, and this guy is flying up draft boards over the past couple of weeks. He is a mauler at the interior of the offensive line, and this is how PFF graded him out this past season. Overall grade of 66.5, but I love the pass blocking grade, 86.5 grade for him. Run blocking, 63.9. No sacks allowed on the year, which is huge, and he did have 7 penalties, so a little bit of a concern there on that one. But still, if Tyler Booker's the pick at pick number 24, that would be a huge win for the Minnesota Vikings, considering if they aren't able to land one of the top guys like a Trey Smith in free agency. But this photo was taken after the college football semifinal 2 years ago when J.J. McCarthy retired Nick Saban in that Rose Bowl game, and Tyler Booker and J.J. were dapping each other up after the game, and Booker actually told him to go win it all. So I'm sure J.J. would love the pick of Tyler Booker, but maybe you could check out a guy from Mizzou, and this could be a trade back option where if the Vikings are at pick number 24, get a second-round pick and a third-round pick. Maybe they could go and look at a guy like Armand Membo. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. But the guard out of Missouri had a really solid year for the Tigers, and PFF loved this guy. Graded out extremely well, and I think he would be a steal in the second or the third round for the Vikes. But 90.4 overall grade, great in the pass block, great in the run block game, and he only had 4 penalties and 827 snaps. So this is, again, if the Vikings aren't able to land one of the top guys in free agency and maybe they allocate some of their funds to the defensive line, then they could look at a guy in the second or third round if they do decide to trade back from that pick at number 24. But also Gray Zabel, he's been flying up draft boards, had a really good appearance at the Senior Bowl as well. North Dakota State guy, and there's something about these North Dakota State offensive linemen that I like a whole lot. And then again, PFF graded him out extremely, extremely well. In 970 snaps this season, he had an overall grade of 90.4. Great in the pass blocking department. Now, yes, this is scaled. He wasn't going against, great competition like these other guys, like in these Power 5 conferences. But I have noticed that Kwesi likes to take a chance on these guys from smaller schools, and maybe Gray Zabel will be another, example of just that. But I also want to talk about Donovan Jackson. Now, this guy's been actually mocked to the Minnesota Vikings quite a bit. Interior offensive lineman from Ohio State. They had one of the most stacked rosters this past season in college football, and he was a big reason why they were so dominant in the run game with, TreVeyon Henderson and Quinshon Judkins at the running back spot for the Buckeyes. But PFF graded him out about middle of the pack, but keep in mind he's going against Big Ten defensive tackles, so he was squaring off with guys like Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham. He still graded out pretty damn well. So, again, Donovan Jackson, I think it'd be an interesting choice at pick number 24. Probably a little rich there, but still keep in mind, I think a trade back is definitely in the cards for the Minnesota Vikings. But another guy from Arizona, Jonah Savainia from the Wildcats, played a pretty good season last year. He's another guy. He's getting a lot more love over the last couple of weeks when these guys start really diving into the tape. And, that's what's going to be so interesting, especially with this interior offensive lineman. Like, I'm sure we'll get a couple of guys that just skyrocket up draft boards. But PFF, 738 snaps this past season, 75.9 overall grade, better in the pass blocking department compared to the run blocking department. But the thing I love about Jonah, big body. And I think the Vikings just need to get bigger guys at the offensive line. Like we saw the Eagles, all 5 of their offensive linemen were 350-plus pounds. So I kind of want the Vikings to take a page out of Howie Roseman's playbook there a little bit and go get these big interior offensive linemen. But let's kick into the defensive tackle position because Ben Gessling did put out a report that the Vikings will be aggressive when targeting interior offensive linemen in free agency, and Walter Nolen has been mocked to the Vikings, countless a number of times. And I didn't want to talk about Mason Graham because he's just got no chance to fall to the top 10, but I would be a massive fan of Mason Graham if he would wear the purple and gold, but there's just a pretty much 0% chance of that happening. But he had a good year for Ole Miss, 6.5 sacks, 35 pressures. He's also great at getting his hands in passing lanes. That's one thing I was reading about him. Very instinctual player. He's got great, stability at his legs and or below his legs where he can just create that good base, get under. He's great at just attacking leverage at the interior of the defensive line. So watch out for Walter Nolen. But my dream draft pick for the Minnesota Vikings, Kenneth Grant, interior offensive lineman from the Michigan Wolverines. And I feel like Kenneth Grant kind of got a little overshadowed a little bit this past season. Now, he is not the Milton Williams type of interior pass rusher where he is just going to wreak havoc in the pass rush game. He is that prototypical Pat Williams, Kevin Williams type of defensive lineman where he'll take on double team blocks. He'll open up lanes for very athletic linebackers, which the Vikings have in Blake Cashman, in Ivan Pace Jr. So Kenneth Grant, if I had to lock in a guy at pick number 24, it would no doubt be the Michigan defensive tackle. But what about Derek Harmon? So Oregon interior defensive lineman as well, and he had a great showing a couple weeks ago at the Senior Bowl. And he's, again, one of those guys flying up draft boards right now where he was supposed to be a day 2 pick, but now people are talking that he could be a first rounder. And, he did have 5 sacks this past season. He's great at exploiting pad leverage, is what I was reading on Derek Harmon. But he's also one of those guys, big body defensive tackle. He is actually 6'5", 310 pounds. So you need one of those maulers at the interior of the defensive line. And Derek Harmon is just that. And he had a great season for the Oregon Ducks over there. But another guy I do want to talk about here, Darius Alexander. Now, this is a guy, played at a small school, played at Toledo, and, maybe I'm just falling in love more with these Toledo prospects after Quinshon Mitchell had an awesome season for the Philadelphia Eagles. But Darius, he had a good year, man. I mean, 37 pressures from the interior. Actually had a touchdown on the season for Toledo, but 4 PBUs, 1 interception actually from the defensive line. So he has some versatility that would fit in very, very well with Brian Flores. You could randomly see him dropping back in the coverage, 40 tackles, 8 TFLs, and 3.5 sacks. So, listen, I think the Vikings are in an interesting spot here, and I think, we're going to have to wait to see what dominoes fall in free agency, because if they go pay a guy like Milton Williams, I don't know if they would target a defensive lineman, but if they go all in on O-line, then definitely D-line becomes a big need. But quickly here on TJ Sanders, interior defensive lineman from South Carolina. He's a stud. I'm a big fan of his game, and this is another guy that will probably go in the second or third round on day 2, and I would love for the Vikings to take him. But 13 games played this season, had 7 tackles for loss, 33 pressures, 4 sacks, 1 PBU, 50 tackles on the season for TJ. Big body in the interior of the defensive line, and he would be another guy where I think the Vikings need to add some more physicality, and he would do just that. But we just went over some interior offensive linemen and defensive linemen. I said my dream pick is Kenneth Grant, but you guys let me know, who is your dream draft pick for the Minnesota Vikings at pick number 24? You guys let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section, whether it's Kenneth Grant, Benjamin Morrison, which we'll talk about him here in a little bit. But you guys let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Now we'll get the more draft targets for your Minnesota Vikings here in a second, but first, I got to tell you guys about today's presenting sponsor, and that is Factor, and eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/VikingsChat50off and use code VikingsChat50off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code VikingsChat50off at factormeals.com/VikingsChat50off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Now, if you guys are ready to optimize your nutrition this year, Factor has chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well easy. They're dietitian approved and ready to heat and eat in 2 minutes, so you can feel right and feel great no matter what life throws at you. Factor arrives fresh and fully prepared, and it's perfect for any active, busy lifestyle. And here, covering the Minnesota Vikings at Chat Sports, we have some long days, and I don't always feel like making full-blown home-cooked meals when I get off work, and that's where Factor stepped in and has completely changed my life. I love their teriyaki chicken. I love their Louisiana shrimp, and I promise you guys will as well. So eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/VikingsChat50off and use that promo code VikingsChat50off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. It's code VikingsChat50off at factormeals.com/VikingsChat50off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. All right, let's keep moving along here to the cornerback position. We're going to talk about a guy who, again, has been mocked to the Vikings a whole lot, and that's Benjamin Morrison. Now, he only played in 6 games this past season for the Fighting Irish, but he is a stud, man. He would have been the best cornerback in the country if he stayed healthy this past year, but he did have 4 PBUs, only allowed 125 yards in 6 games. So fantastic stuff. But what I love about him, he also offers some versatility. You can blitz him off the edge. We saw that a whole lot with ND this past season. I think if Brian Flores had to make the pick at number 24, he would probably go Benjamin Morrison. And again, let's just say the Vikings do decide not to bring back Byron Murphy. Cornerback becomes a massive need for the Vikings heading into the draft. But let's talk about a little bit of a sleeper here. Maxwell Hairston. Big fan of his game, extremely physical corner. Now, he is a little more raw than some of these other guys we're going to talk about, so it could take him a year or two to develop. But he also dealt with injuries this past season, only played in 7 games, but still gave up only 262 yards in just 7 games played this past year. 5 PBUs, 1 interception. Definitely an interesting prospect coming out of Kentucky. And you also got to think about, like, Mekhi Blackmon. He's also a sleeper at the Vikings cornerback spot to potentially, get more run this upcoming year. But let's just say the Vikings at pick number 24, they trade back, get a second and a third rounder, and they re-sign Byron Murphy. Then you got Mekhi Blackmon coming up. Then you just have that rookie cornerback be your CB3. I don't hate the idea there. But a Texas guy, cornerback, Jahdae Barron. Now, again with him, very raw, is going to need some time to develop, but I do love his game. And Mel Kiper is a big fan of his game as well. And, he played in 16 games this past season. He was healthy throughout the whole thing, and he had an awesome year for the Longhorns. 279 yards given up in just 16 games played. I'm a big fan of him. Did not allow a single touchdown this past season, 16 PBUs, 5 interceptions, extremely versatile guy as well, but he would need some more time to develop. But, again, cornerback could be a big need for the Minnesota Vikings. And how about Quincy Riley, Louisville cornerback here? Now, Quincy Riley, he is a guy for Louisville that was, played all over the lot for him. He played in multiple positions, but he's a 6-foot corner. weighing about 200 pounds. I like his versatility. He actually started off at Middle Tennessee State. Then he transferred to Louisville, and over the last 3 seasons, he has been very consistent. Had 3 interceptions in 22, 3 interceptions in 23, 2 interceptions in 2022 as well. And he offers you some versatility at that cornerback position. And also, he was born and raised in South Carolina as well. So, yeah, I mean, only 9 PBUs or 15 PBUs this past season for Louisville. But another guy from a smaller school, Siobhan Ravel Jr. Now, he was getting a lot more love before the last couple of weeks. People were talking about him going round 1. Now I'm seeing him mocked more in round 2. And, you know, he had a pick 6 this past season. Pretty solid corner. But, again, more on Ravel. I think what stands out with him compared to these other guys is he's 6'3", 193 pounds. So he's a long, lanky corner. Kind of reminds me of Xavier Rhodes just a little bit back with the Minnesota Vikings. And I think the Vikings definitely do have a need for just a bigger corner. And I think Flores, like, especially when he's dropping back into those zones, you want much more lanky guys that can get over the top and just, you know, lock up certain areas on the field. But that's where it's at the cornerback position. Now let's talk about some running back draft targets for the Minnesota Vikings. So I did not include Ashton Genty in this list just because I think it's unlikely that he does fall to pick number 24. But what about Amari and Hampton here? Had a solid season with North Carolina. This is a guy a lot of these draft nerds absolutely love. Coming out of UNC this past season, has some versatility, can catch the ball in the passing game. He had 38 receptions, and what I love about him, no fumbles. Will not put the ball on the deck, but over 1,600 yards, 5.9 yards per carry. Definitely a guy I would be interested in. But also another guy, Dylan Sampson. Now, this is the burner in this year's draft. He's going to probably end up running a 4.3 40. Again, has some versatility at that position as well. 20 receptions on the season. And, you know, he does have some sort of a fumbling issue. 4 fumbles on the year, but 1,400-plus yards this past season on 258 carries. And, again, he's a guy, round 2 or round 3. I would be all in on the Vikings drafting him. But what about a little Quinshon Judkins here? Now, he split time with TreVeyon Henderson. We'll talk about Henderson here in a little bit, and I'll actually give you guys a quick pro comp for Henderson. I actually see a lot of Dalvin Cook in his game, but Quinshon Judkins had another monster year for the Buckeyes. 16 total touchdowns, over 1,000 yards, averaged 5.5 yards per carry. He kind of reminds me of Isaiah Pacheco, the way he runs, very physical, breaks arm tackles very easily, but TreVeyon Henderson's actually the Ohio State running back I like more. And the biggest reason for that, he's elite in the blitz pickup. And with the Vikings, they were rolling out C.J. Ham this past season to be their third down running back. You would just have TreVeyon Henderson be that guy. And the way he runs reminds me a lot of Dalvin Cook. Physical runner, does have that breakaway speed. He is more of a one-move guy where he'll just put his foot in the ground, get north and south. But the one negative on TreVeyon, he's got a lot of carries under his belt. So how long will his NFL career be? TBD. But again, if he's the pick in the 3rd round, I'll be thrilled about it. But another guy I would love, and this guy's definitely moving up my draft boards here, is just a pure running back, Caleb Johnson. Now, he really was not supposed to be drafted before this year, and then he had a monster year for the Hawkeyes, playing over there in Iowa. Has dual threat ability, 22 receptions, 23 total touchdowns on the year, but check out that yards per carry, everybody. 6.4 yards per clip. Great stuff from Caleb Johnson. Big fan of his game. 240 carries, and, you know, if you could somehow double up, go Tyler Booker round 1, Caleb Johnson in round 3, I think it'd be a great move for the Minnesota Vikings. But, hey, if you guys made it to the end of today's show, longer video today, just really want to dive into a lot of these draft prospects that the Vikings could draft. But if you guys made it to the end, just give me a skull down below in the comment section so I can know where all the real ones are at and all the real ones that watch this entire YouTube video. But also, I am on Twitter. Give me a follow over there. At Pat Sieps is a Twitter handle. If you guys give me a follow over there, I'll give you guys a follow right back. But we'll see you guys next time. As always, let's go Vikes.